Hello everybody and welcome to the Football Philosophy channel, and tomorrow it is the Manchester Derby. Massive game. All the games are big games at the minute. Every league game's important, every point's important, any win you can get is of massive importance. With this being a local derby, it puts extra pressure on the team. It seems to be even more important. It isn't really more important. Every point's as important as another point, and especially against other teams that you're hoping to be competing with during the season, whether it's competing for top four. Obviously at the minute we're still hoping that we can mount a title challenge. You know, there's 10 games gone in the season, and you know, we are 2 points behind the leaders, I think, if we win our game in hand. So I think most people are entitled to think, look, we could stay up there. Why can't we mount a title challenge? And if that's the case, we've obviously got to get points off the teams that are around us in the table. But getting points off them doesn't necessarily mean having to beat them. If you can beat them, it's fantastic. But not losing to them is probably equally as important. A lot of people don't think like that. If you're playing a team that you're competing with at the top, if they happen to beat you, the difference is massive. I mean, if you look at us and City at the minute, we're above City in the table. If they beat us, they go ahead of us. Obviously, if we can beat them, we stretch our lead. But if we just draw with them, we remain above them, and you live to fight another day. So, you know, if you can remain above them, and you know, hopefully your next 2 or 3 fixtures are not as tough, and we've just won 4 games on the bounce. Maybe we could win our next 2 or 3 fixtures, and maybe they might drop points. So you could end up stretching your lead just by staying in the lead tomorrow and getting that draw. I'm not suggesting that they go with 11 men behind the ball and park the bus. I'm not saying that for 1 minute. I'm just saying that just drawing the game tomorrow wouldn't be a devastating blow at all. Not in any way, shape or form. It'd be fine. What I want to point out is the way we've been playing at the moment in these big games. In the last, by the time we play tomorrow, I've worked it out that we'll have played 11 games in 4 days, and one of them was the win at West Ham. But the other 2 games were at home to PSG and away to Leipzig. Now, in those 2 games, a point would have been more than adequate. A point would have been more than adequate. And to me, we played a formation that had too many forwards in it. I know I've said this, but I'm going to come in a minute to Ole's press conference, and I'm going to explain 1 or 2 of the things that he said in the press conference that are pretty similar to what I've been saying. And when we play this game tomorrow, we need to pick a team that hasn't got too many attack-minded players in the team. And I'm going to explain 1 or 2 things that Ole said that back up my point, and I don't understand why he doesn't think more like I do when he goes into those games. So as I was saying, bear in mind, we've just played PSG, we've just played Leipzig. In both of those games, a point would have been more than adequate. Tomorrow, we're playing it's our 4th game in 11 days, but it's our 3rd game in 11 days, where to me, a point is more than adequate, and I hope he's got the correct mindset going into that game. So I'll come to 1 or 2 points about the team shape in a minute, because he did mention 1 or 2 things that I found interesting. But I'll start from the beginning of the press conference this afternoon. He was asked how important it is to start quickly. How important is it to start quickly in the derby? He said to start quickly is important, but to start good. So I think that's an interesting comment. It doesn't sound a lot, but maybe by saying starting quickly, you're talking about going at them, trying to get a goal, trying to put them under pressure. But starting good doesn't necessarily mean starting quick. Obviously, you've got to start quickly. In other words, you start well. There's different ways of starting quickly. It could mean that you start by playing well from the first minute or 2, because that's quickly, the first minute or 2. But starting quickly could also mean that you're running around quickly. You don't necessarily have to run around quickly to start well. If you keep yourself in shape and make it difficult for the opposition, speed is not one of the most important things in that setup. You know, you use your brain and you use your intelligence to be in the right place and to keep the team shape correct. He said goals impact games, and we'd like to get the first goal. I've been saying quite regularly, I use that phrase quite a lot, goals change games, and that's what he's basically saying the same thing. Goals impact games. If you can get the first goal, he did say that, it can be so important going forward. So as much as he's saying he'd like to get the first goal, he's also said we want to start good. That was his phrase. So starting good for me could mean starting more solidly. If you think about the game in Leipzig, we conceded. I didn't even realise how quick that goal was on the show that I did the other day. I said it was in the first 4 minutes, and having rewatched the game again, it was within the first 2 minutes, that first goal. So compared to Leipzig, we'll have started good if it's 0-0 after 2 minutes. So that's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, obviously, but you definitely do not want to be conceding a goal in the first 10 minutes, let alone the first 2 minutes. He was then asked, you've conceded 17 goals in the league so far this season and kept only 2 clean sheets. What do you think about that? He said, well, there's lots of things we could do better, like defending from the front. I like that comment, defending from the front, and that's one of the things anybody who watched the show where I pointed out United's shape against Leipzig, where we had too many players in front of the ball. So, and obviously a lot of people are criticising United's defenders and how United's defenders defend, but you can't defend well if you haven't got enough players defending. You do need plenty of, you need at least 8 men who have got behind the ball and get behind the ball quickly. 7's not enough if you play 4-4-2. You've got 8 men behind the ball quickly. The way we're playing with 2 forwards plus Bruno helping the forwards, we regularly only got 7 men behind the ball. One thing that I pointed out, by the way, on Twitter, is somebody actually said to me, it's too many, you don't need many. We've just got beat 3-2 by Leipzig. If you watch that game back, the team that beat us, they got everybody behind the ball every time we got the ball. So in that very game, you can see how it's supposed to work. You get at least 8, 9 players. I'm talking about outfield players, obviously not the keeper. You get at least 8 outfield players behind the ball when they've got the ball, and most teams get 10, and 9, and the odd team even use 10 men behind the ball when defending. So while he didn't have a go at the defenders, he said we need to defend better from the front. But I was a little bit disappointed to hear him say a minute or so later that we want to defend maybe higher up. He did say maybe. Don't like the sound of that. It almost sounds to me as though he's not sure exactly. I mean, it's Friday afternoon and the game's tomorrow. It sounds like there's a little possibility there that he's not 100% sure how he wants to play. But he did say we want to defend maybe higher up. Defending higher up sounds, a lot of people might think that means with a high press, in other words, defending in their half. I hope it doesn't, because if they beat the high press, we've got too many players up the field, and City are great at beating the press. Our press isn't the best press in the world, so he's saying maybe we need to defend higher up. What I hope he means by that is that the actual forwards are defending better, so that when City have got the ball in their half, I think we'll be better suited tomorrow by dropping back so that our forwards are nearer the halfway line. Just let City have the ball in their half. It's when they get into our half that they can cause damage. The further we can keep them from our goal, the better. So when he says maybe we want to defend higher up, I hope he means that the forwards are in defensive positions, because your forwards are your highest players up. So if the forwards are defending from the halfway line or just over it, that'll do me. I would forget that press for this game and try and get a foothold in the game. If somebody was to say to me now, like we've spoke about getting the first goal, I'd love to get the first goal. But if you're defending deep like that, you can also get a goal on the break. I would absolutely love to get the first goal. But if somebody could say to me that it's going to be 0-0 at half time, I'd take that. I would absolutely bite your hand off. We've got to start, like we've just said, we've got to start well. We were 1-0 down in 2 minutes the other night. I think it was 2-0 within about 15 minutes, wasn't it? So that'd be starting well for me. If it could be 0-0 at half time, I'd call that a good start. He was asked how the team were really after the game the other night, how they reacted. Bit of a funny question. he did come up with, look, he said, what did you expect him to say? We put the flags out, or we threw a party? You know, how did the team react after getting beat and knocked out of the Champions League? Obviously, they were gutted, and he said, I can't remember the phrase he used, but that's basically what he said. What do you expect? It's a bit of a silly question to me. What's the point of it? But what he did add to that, which I'm a bit fed up of hearing, if I'm honest, he said it was a tight group, it was a difficult group, and he mentioned that Leipzig reached the semis last year and PSG reached the final. That's all fine. But the bit that I don't like, he said it's fine margins, and I've heard that too often for me recently. It is fine margins, but I'd just like the fine margin to be on our side a little bit more often. You know, in the tight games and the big games, I'd like that fine margin to fall on our side rather than being against us, if you like. When you say a fine margin, we've got beat 3-2 by Leipzig, although we were 3-0 down. You could argue that was a fine margin. We got beat by 1 goal. If you take it back into last season, we got beat by Chelsea in a semi-final. We got beat by Sevilla in a semi-final. All fairly tight games. I think Chelsea did go 3-up again, though, and we got 1 back. So maybe they're not all fine margins. But even when they are fine margins, for me, they're not in our favour often enough. Coming up to 2 years in the job now, he was asked, I thought this was a bit of a cutting question, any improvement? We're getting better and better, he said. We're looking more like a Man United team with fast attackers. That's what he said. For me, it's a tad embarrassing, that. A good dynamic and players who can create magic. What he said there, for me, is for the fans. I hope he said it knowing that that's what the fans want to hear, rather than that he thinks like that. Because it's about playing well. It's not about necessarily having fast attackers. It's about having good players, having good attackers, and having a good dynamic and players who can create magic. Players creating magic is not necessarily the way forward. Each time you go on the field, if you're relying on somebody creating a bit of magic rather than having a good team ethic, rather than having good movement in the team, good passing of the ball, that's sustainable. That's sustainable football. The way City, I know they've got good players as well who can do a bit of magic, but the bits of magic need to be the icing on the cake. They really, really do. You need to be able to win games without creating magic, and not necessarily either with, you know, okay, you do need a bit of pace in football, but to mention fast attackers as the be all and end all, to me, isn't really the way to play football. You need good players who can pass the ball around, control the ball, make good decisions, and then you can start moving forward. As I say, his answer there, I think he knows what a lot of the fans want to hear. So hopefully it's not his idea, but really I think he might be just saying what he thinks people want to hear. He then said, though, it's been a step up from the Europa League last year. Now, I don't really want to put this over as though I'm having a go at Ole Gunnar Solskjaer about this, but he's put on a spot, and I don't believe he's got these questions. Look, if he knew what the questions were going to be, I think he'd have better answers lined up. So he's got to think on the spot, and he's got an answer there on the spot, because what he says next to me is absolutely embarrassing. I'm going to read it out in a minute. What he says next is absolutely embarrassing. But I do feel sorry for him in that he's put on the spot. He's got asked a question in a press conference and he's got to answer it. So he was asked if it's been a step up. He said it's a step up from the Europa League last year, right? Then he said, we've moved on from a team that only just managed to beat Rochdale and Colchester in the Carabao Cup last season, and a team that struggled to beat Astana and Partizan convincingly, he said. To me, it's absolutely embarrassing statements. What on earth have those games last season got to do with the team today? We played against... Why mention Rochdale in the Carabao Cup? What is the relevance? Against Rochdale, I've looked at the team. I've just had a look at it. It's easy to find. we played Romero, Rojo, Pereira, Lingard, Chong and Jones. That's 6 of the starting 11 are players that are either not with us or they're out on loan or can't get anywhere near the first team. And when I say can't get in the first team, I don't mean that they were in the first team then. Obviously, against the likes of Rochdale, you know, we could have played a much stronger team. What's the point of saying that we struggled to beat Rochdale, Colchester, Partizan and Astana? We're not playing our full team. If we'd have played our full team back then, we'd have put these teams to bed much more easily. There was 3 players in that. I've split this into different parts, if you like. So there's six players who can't get in the first team. There was 3 players against Rochdale who do get plenty of first team games, but I wouldn't put my house on them like it's the Manchester derby tomorrow. I wouldn't put my house on Greenwood starting tomorrow, or Pogba, or Axel. But there's 3 players that played against Rochdale who do get games. And then there was only 2 players who I sort of would put my house on. Wan-Bissaka and Fred played against Rochdale. So I would sort of, maybe not my house, but I'd put a lot of money on those 2 players starting tomorrow. So there's 2 regular starting players in the team against Rochdale. And most of the players in the team, you know, wasn't in the team then. So why compare that game? What's the relevance? Against Astana, Romero, Dalot, Chong, Gomez, Jones and Rojo. All players, 6 players who can't get in, don't get games. 3 players who get some games, Matic, Greenwood and Axel. And then 2 players who I would put me money on playing tomorrow, which is Rashford and Fred. 2 players in the team that are automatic starters in the team at the moment. And it's not that that was the team at the time. It's purely and simply that those were the players that he gave a game to on that night. So mentioning that, those 2 games to me, or those 4 games, I won't bother with going through the other 2 games as well. But it's just embarrassing, and it's a ridiculous comment. Just noticing, by the way, he's saying how much we struggled against Astana. We did have Rashford and Greenwood up top in that game, and I expect them both to start in the Manchester derby tomorrow. So look, it's a team game. I'm always saying it's a team game. It's not their fault. You know, they didn't have the backup. But I'm sure there's lots of fans out there who think, right, we've got Rashford and Greenwood. We'll beat Astana comfortably by about 4 or 5-0, no matter who else is in the team. But football doesn't work like that. Doesn't work like that. It's a team game. No matter who you are, you need good players around you, or certainly you need players that are up to the standard that you are and that you need to play, or you want to play with. Andy Mitten asked a question. I've known Andy a long time. He's a great lad. He asked a question that it's one of my most hated questions that I hear put to people, and I hear it mentioned on the TV. I've read about it in the newspaper. You see it all the time. I've probably heard it 1,000 times, this question. And it went, next time I see Andy, I don't mind having a chat with you about it either, mate. But what have you and the players learned from Leipzig the other night and the other 6 games in the Champions League? I hate that question. What have you learned? You know, look, you can learn things in football and you can continue to learn. Nobody knows everything, obviously. Nobody knows everything about football. But what have you learned? It comes out so often, and the answers are just the same all the time. There's nothing new to say. So what have you learned? So what did Ole say? We have learned, this is what he said, we have learned that any small mistake at that level will get punished. 2 things about that. First of all, it's not true, because every small mistake doesn't get punished, because teams miss chances in all games. After it was 2-0 the other night, I think he's called Forsberg. The lad ended up on the penalty spot with only De Gea to beat, and he shot wide. You don't get punished, but you do not get punished for all your mistakes at any level. Make no mistake about that. So it's a fallacy. That's the first thing. It's a fallacy. So you don't get punished. Now, one of the things that I heard about that as well, because obviously you hear this on the British TV all the time, you hear it about teams coming up from the Championship to the Premier League, or when you get in the Premier League, you always get punished for your mistakes. No, you don't. It's not true. You might get punished more often, but you don't always get punished. So I think that's it's just a question that does me head in, to be honest. What have you learned from those games? Look, Ollie's been involved in the game. How old is he now? I don't know how old he is. Probably about 50. I bet he's been involved in football for 40 years. Do you know what I mean? If you didn't know that already, that you can't give chances away and you can't make mistakes, or you might get punished, and if you didn't know already that you're more likely to get punished by the better players that you play against, the higher level you're at, the more you don't always get punished, like I just said, but you're more likely to get punished by better players. If you didn't know that already, then you shouldn't be in the game of football for me. But I'm not having a go at him. He's got to answer the question, and there's nothing else to think of. And every time you hear a manager answer that question, it's the same thing. Oh, we've learnt that we can't give the ball away. Oh, right. I could have told you that when I was 12. Right. He was asked about the Paul Pogba situation. If he was disappointed with what was said, and I was pleased with the way he answered that. What people's representatives say can't affect me. I was disappointed with going out of the Champions League during the week. So he give it a wide berth, if you like, and I don't blame him for that. He can't help what's been said, and they've got a player of such value to us as well. When I say value, I'm talking about monetary value, not necessarily on the field of play every time he plays, but they can't just bomb him out of the squad and forget about him, and no matter what his agent has said. That's my opinion. They just can't afford to do that. So I can't really blame him for sidestepping that issue. And he came on as a sub the other night, Pogba. I won't be surprised one little bit. I'm going to have a go at guessing the team in a bit, and I won't be surprised if Pogba's in the starting lineup. He came on as a sub the other night, so why not? A Norwegian journalist who seems to be on every week at the press conference asked him. He mentioned that Molde have qualified for the Europa League, which was news to me. I didn't remember seeing their name when I did look at it briefly the other day. But it just shows you where we've come to now, doesn't it? People who, lots of Ollie outers. You say here's a manager whose best success was running Molde in the Norwegian league, and here we are now. There's a chance that we could draw them in the Europa League. Ollie did say what a special day it would be for Molde if we did draw them. I'm sure it would be. But it's not where we want to be, is it? Turning out against Molde in the Europa League. That Norwegian journalist, by the way, last time he was on, asked a question about the Norwegian national team. As far as I'm concerned, we need to ask questions about Man United more often. I'm not sure I'm happy with him being on every week. That same lad. So that's it. Massive game tomorrow. It's so important that we avoid defeat. I'm not saying that we've got to go there and park the bus. I'm not saying that, not one little bit. But we have got to be diligent in our work. We have got to get players behind the ball. We have got to be more difficult to beat. As was mentioned in the press conference, we've kept 2 clean sheets in the league all season. We've just played, as I've just said, 2 games where a point would have been adequate. We've lost them both. We're now playing in another game, whereas a point will be adequate. But you've got to think like this. When you're playing in such a tough game, if you do set yourselves up properly, if you do make yourselves difficult to beat, you do grow in confidence in the game. You do get moments of your own. We need to be difficult to beat. I've just said before that if it was 0-0 at half time, I'd take that. I'm going to take that a step further. I'd take it if it was 0-0 after an hour. And then let's worry about if we can start getting forward more. Let's see if we've gained in confidence. Let's see if City start to get frustrated and start giving the ball away a little bit more often. All these little things can conspire in your favour. Look, obviously, I'd love you could break away at any time. You can score a goal. You can get a set piece. There's all different things that can happen. So that can happen. But we've got to be set up properly tomorrow. We've not been set up properly against PSG, and we paid for it. We've not been set up properly against Leipzig, and we paid for it. All I'm saying is tomorrow we need to set up properly. We need to make ourselves difficult to beat and take it from there. What will the team be? I've had a little stab at it. He was asked about the fitness, obviously. He said Anthony Martial, he's going to be with the squad. I can't remember the exact phrase he used, but he said he'd be involved. That's what he said. Anthony Martial will be involved. Possibly sounds to me like he might be on the bench. I don't really know, obviously, whether he's going to be properly fit, whether they'll start him. If he is fit, he needs to play. We need to get hold of that ball in the front line and win a few free kicks and get ourselves up the field, which Marshall's great at, by the way. This is not the team that I'd like to see us play. This is the team that I'm having a stab at that I think Ollie will go with tomorrow. I think he'll abandon the back 5. I think it'll be David De Gea in goal. I think he'll go with Wan-Bissaka. Lindelof, if he's fit, I think he will be. I think he was taken off as a precaution with his back that he's been having a problem with. I think it'll be Wan-Bissaka, Lindelof, Maguire and Shaw. I do think Shaw will play if he's fit ahead of Telles. I think it'll be a midfield diamond of McTominay at the base of it, Fred to the right and Pogba to the left, with Bruno at the point of it. And then up front, definitely Rashford, Marshall if he's fit, and if not Marshall, it'll be Greenwood. That's what I think he'll pick. It's not what I'd go with, but that's my guess. No matter what team he picks, I hope we get at least a point. I'd be happy with a point. I'd be happy to stay above City in the league. I'd be over the moon to win the game and stretch our lead. But I would definitely be starting out in the first instance of just making ourselves solid, difficult to break down, difficult to score against, and ultimately difficult to beat. I'll be back live tomorrow. It's a 5:30 game tomorrow, so the team news will be out about 4:30. So about 4:15 tomorrow, I'll be back. I'll read a couple of the team expected teams from a couple of the newspapers, like I've done the last couple of games, and then obviously the team news will be out, and we can discuss and we can answer questions, whatever people think about the team or what I think about the team when it comes out. So that'll be at about 4:15 tomorrow. I hope you've enjoyed that show. If you did enjoy it, please subscribe. If you didn't enjoy it, don't tell anyone. Keep stum.